I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
What is up, guys? Happy Wednesday. I know you're not used to seeing me on a Wednesday afternoon, but I am going on vacation officially after the stream, actually. So I will not be here Thursday, Friday, or Sunday. You will not see me live again until Tuesday evening. I'm going to be hitting the road. I'm going to be going to New York, going to hang out with some peeps there for my birthday. So that's why I am live right now. To get some clips for you guys for the days that I will not be here. So you won't see a live stream for me until Tuesday night, but there'll be plenty of clips that you can watch. So what's up and welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the Sabby and JB show. And you can catch me here typically on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. What is up, guys? I want to start out by giving shout outs to people in the chat. We have quite a bit to discuss today. What's going on, fellow citizen says, isn't Mehdi Hasan another Sam Cedar, Owen Jones type 3LA plant pointless to attend to? So there are some things that are said in this interview that I think are very revealing that I think you guys should hear in reference to why Mehdi Hasan left MSNBC and also about corporate media and censorship altogether. Shout out to Lawrence says, Shaka when the walls fell. Shout out to Sky Blue Joy for gifting a Sabby Sabs membership. Thank you. I don't know who you gifted it to, but thank you for that. Shout out to Miguel says, peace. What's going on, CBC voter says, happy Wednesday, Sabby Sabs. Have some time off. You deserve it. Yes, I do. It's been a while. Sabby needs a breaky break. Shout out to Red Six says, I almost forgot you were going live today, but nevertheless, happy Wednesday. Oh, by the way, happy early birthday wishes. Thank you, Red Six. Shout out to Hannah G says, Sabby. Greetings, Joe says thumbnail is a who's who of narcissistic sociopath with contempt for the true narrative. Manufacturing consent is in none of their forte. Shout out to Dr. Nick says, hi, everybody. Greetings, Java the Cat. Tonight, my comrades and I will be addressing our city council in hopes of them adopting a ceasefire resolution. Oh, Ukiah, California. Wish us luck and happy early birthday, Sabby. Good luck and thank you. It's great to see people out there in the streets doing the damn thing. Shout out to Tim says, doobie doobie doo. What's going on? Volvo says, hey, Cookie. Shout out to Gamers says, hello. Greetings, Bang Theory says, hola. Shout out to Eric Jordan, Sabby Sab salute. What's up, Eric? Shout out to Obed says, greetings from the Netherlands. It's always great when I hear like the international people in the chat. That is awesome. Rose said, now why is my mother on so early? Yeah, because I'm going on vacation. So you guys aren't going to see me live until Tuesday night. Shout out to Dusty says, Kyle and Robbie from the Hill should fight. That would be an interesting conversation. Shout out to Roger Meadows. Thank you for the super chat. Ugh, that beat is tough. That's a gangster rap beat. I love that beat. Isn't it awesome? I love that beat. When I heard that, I was like, this is for me. Shout out to Mastermind says Israel is spelled A before E except after a river to the sea. Shout out to All One Same. Happy birthday, Sabby. Thank you. Early happy birthday. My birthday will be Friday. And I'm going to get a chance to celebrate with some peeps in New York. Shout out to Marcella, says, Schmuck Israel. What is going on? James says, holy crap, a Wednesday show. I know, it's weird. It feels weird. It feels a little weird for me. I'm not used to going live on a Wednesday. Shout out to Lori, says, have fun and happy birthday. Greetings Soul says, hi, Sabby. Happy birthday, love. Thank you so much. Okay. And shout out to Mike, says, what's good, Sabs? All right, let's go ahead and give a shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Let's give them their props up in this house. Props to the patrons. Props to the patrons. All right. Thank you so much to Sabby patrons. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. There's also Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you. All right, let's go ahead and share that thumbnail so you can see what we're discussing today, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, yesterday was Super Tuesday, so I definitely have some things to show you in reference to how those states voted. Today, we're discussing Krystal and Kyle and Mehdi Hasan. This was surprising to me. So Krystal and Kyle actually interviewed Mehdi Hasan, and they were talking about corporate media. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about, why Mehdi Hasan left MSNBC. There's a couple of things that are said there that are pretty revealing, so we'll get into that. We're also going to discuss Super Tuesday. You'll notice there's a picture there of Joe Biden and Nikki Haley, who also has some interesting news for you folks. We'll get into those Super Tuesday results and also those uncommitted and no preference votes, which I think are significant, even though some medias are trying to actually downplay that. We're also going to discuss, if you have not heard, Miss Warhawk herself, Victoria Nuland has resigned, and the timing of it is quite interesting. We'll get into that. And last but not least, we are going to discuss Kirsten Gillibrand is confronted, and we're going to get into her connection to the Israeli lobby. So if you are not familiar with Kirsten Gillibrand, senator from New York, she ran for president through the Democratic Party in 2020. She was one of the people that actually dropped out the race pretty early on, and she considers herself to be a champion for women's rights, which is really interesting considering her position on Gaza in reference to women and children. But we are going to get into all of that, folks. All right, making sure I got those chats. Okay. Let's get into the story about Kirsten Gillibrand. So apparently she was speaking at an event recently, and she was confronted by multiple protesters, one after another, and they really took her to task. So I want to get into that confrontation first, and then I want to show you something about Kirsten Gillibrand in reference to her connection to the Israeli lobby. And I want to show you just how much support Israel has started to lose. You're not going to believe who's speaking out now against what's happening in Israel. So this confrontation took place. This was a town hall meeting that Kirsten Gillibrand was actually hosting, and there were multiple pro-Palestinian activists that had some things to say to Kirsten Gillibrand. And here we go.
Gillibrand, how can you say that you represent New Yorkers when 70% of this country demands a ceasefire in Gaza, when 45% of New Yorkers demand a ceasefire, when 53% of New Yorkers do not want to send Israeli funding or military aid anymore?
So let's go back to this activist first, because notice that she brought statistics. She brought the data. She said 45% of New Yorkers demand a ceasefire.
Of New Yorkers demand a ceasefire when 53% of New Yorkers do not want to send Israeli funding or military aid anymore.
Senator Gillibrand, you received $366,000
This woman right here. You see, this is what makes me so happy about the youth, the young people, because they're actually doing their homework. They're doing the research. They're checking into these politicians' funds, and they're starting to say, let me say why they have this position in reference to Israel. Who are they taking money from? They're looking at their donors. So again, always follow the money, and then you'll understand why these politicians vote the way that they do in reference to legislation. So I'm so proud of the Gen Z kids. I'm so proud of the youth, because they are really holding these politicians' feet to the fire. And this is different from what I saw with my generation. And I'm a millennial, but I felt like we didn't really hold, like people like Barack Obama. I feel like we didn't really hold his feet to the fire. You know, Barack Obama was reelected. Also, Mitt Romney was a terrible candidate. But that being said, I feel like we weren't doing that. I feel like we weren't looking into the funds to see where are these politicians getting their money from. Now, it happens more so now. And I think Bernie Sanders will give him credit for that, for bringing people's attention to the money in the first damn place. But I still remember when Barack Obama was president, I remember being very disappointed with the way that he governed the country and some of the policy decisions that he made. But I never once thought to follow the money and look to see where he's getting his donations from. But the youth today, they are not playing around. So she is right.
Anymore.
Senator Gillibrand, you received $366,000 from pro-Israel lobbies in this past election cycle. Why are you allowing your interests to be bought by foreign governments?
We're sending billions of our taxpayer dollars to kill children and women. 30,000 people.
So what's wrong with this guy? Like this guy, it's almost like, is he having a conundrum? Like, this is very weird the way this guy reacts. So this woman said, why are you allowing your interests to be bought by a foreign country? This cannot be said enough, ladies and gentlemen, because all these politicians that say they stand with Israel or they represent Israel, we live in the United States. We don't live in Israel. Why are they taking money for their campaigns? Why are they partnering with the Israeli lobby when this is an organization that represents the interests of another country, not the interests of the United States? Remember, JFK, again, he wanted this organization, had a different name back then. He wanted that organization, AIPAC, to actually be held accountable. He wanted them to register as a foreign agent. There's a reason for this. But this guy that comes in here, yikes, yikes.
Bought by foreign governments.
We're sending billions of our taxpayer dollars.
This is holding us back. Notice it's the youth, and no shade to, older people that are watching me, because it's not everybody, but it's the youth. It's the younger people who are speaking up and raising their voices and speaking out against this injustice. But you notice who's at the event. Once again, if you go to these town hall meetings, a lot of times, most of the people that are in there tend to be older people, like boomer generation or silent generation. He's yelling at her saying, stop, stop, stop what? There's an actual genocide that is happening, and he's yelling at her for calling it out, trying to defend and protect Kirsten Gillibrand. Kirsten Gillibrand needs to be called out. All these politicians that take money from the Israeli lobby need to be called out. So he is holding her, they're holding her feet to the fire. But this guy is losing his shit. Like, this is ridiculous.
We're sending billions of our taxpayer dollars to kill children and women. 30,000 people have been murdered.
She's saying 30,000 people have been murdered, and all he can say is stop, stop. And look at the wife sitting there just kind of like, no, she has a right to address her representative. If Kirsten Gillibrand is a senator for New York, she has the right to address what Kirsten Gillibrand has been doing.
You have the money to correct these historic wrongs. If you took the money that you had given to Israel.
Watch this guy right here, older guy. He said, why don't you shut the hell up? You see what's holding the country back, ladies and gentlemen? People who still want to protect the status quo. Some of these people, this is the thing that gets me. Some of the people telling the younger people, stop it with the protests, be quiet, shut up. Some of these people participated in the Vietnam War protest. How far many people have fallen? But he was very nasty.
If you took the money that you had given to Israel, the $15 billion you gave to Israel of our taxpayer money.
You are lying to the people, saying there is a peace process when Israel is the one that has been consistent.
That's that guy again saying, shut up, you stupid. You see how we're spoken? You see how people are spoken to? You see how people are spoken to? Again, how many young people are here? All the young people who are there to protest against what Kirsten Gillibrand has been doing. And you see, it's the older generation that is basically telling us just to sit down and just to go with the status quo. No disruption, no pushback, no confrontation. There was confrontation about the Vietnam War. There was confrontation about the Iraq War. There was confrontation during the Civil Rights Movement. This country is known for confronting things. If you look at the entire history of the United States, all you see is a lot of confrontation.
Declining a ceasefire. 25-year-old Aaron Bushnell gave up his life, immolated. His last words were free Palestine. And this is what you do to political opponents. Family members are being murdered.
Let us speak.
Last week, 3 more.
You heard what this woman said? She just said, my family members are being murdered in Gaza. Someone says, let her speak. I'm assuming they're referring to Kirsten Gillibrand. But this woman just told you her family members are being murdered in Gaza. And they want her to shut up about it.
My family members are being murdered.
Let us speak.
Last week, 3 more of my family members have been murdered in Gaza. She's not answering though. She's not answering.
That's a good one to get Kirsten Gillibrand with, because she claims to be like this woman's advocate and protecting women's rights. That's her really big thing. In fact, she ran on that, but she doesn't care about the women. Kirsten Gillibrand cares about money, because she ain't say nothing about all those women and children that have been killed in Gaza. Not one thing. Boy, I tell you, she had this coming.
Hamas doesn't want to return the hostages.
They offered to return the hostages. That is a lie. They offered to return the hostages.
So there's Kirsten Gillibrand trying to lie and saying that Hamas doesn't want to return the hostages. Like I said, these people, they know that the politicians are lying. So this person stood up and said, that is a lie. Hamas offered to return the hostages. So you see how, guys, they don't just lie when they have these interviews on mainstream media. These politicians lie at these town halls as well. And it took, you really need to have people who actually know what's going on to appear at these events and to push back on the lies that the politicians are telling.
You motherfuckers decline. Every single morning I wake up and I see Palestinians dying day after day after day after day, body after body after body, with our taxpayer dollars funding it.
How many Palestinian children need to be killed before you call for a ceasefire? You have blood on your hands. My people deserve to live. My people deserve to live. You have your blood on your hands.
He said, my people deserve to live. You have blood on your hands. So that was Kirsten Gillibrand confronted at a town hall in New York. Apparently, she really did not want to hear from the constituents that have criticism for her. But I want to show you why. You have to, again, follow the money and see where Kirsten Gillibrand has been getting her money from. So this is open secrets. This is public information, free public information. Let's see where she has been receiving her money from. You can see top industry says securities and investments, top contributor, Davis Polk and Ward. She's very much corporate. Okay. And there it is. The top recipient is David Polk and Ward Well with over $155,000. But the second highest recipient is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, with over $151,000 donated to Kirsten Gillibrand. You can do this for any of your representatives. Look them up on Open Secrets and find out if they're taking money from AIPAC. Then you understand why they're voting to give more money to Israel. Then you understand why they're lying, saying that Hamas doesn't want to return the hostages. Kirsten Gillibrand, and I called it out from day one, she isn't trying to appeal to voters like the Palestinian people. She is trying to appeal to people that live in suburbia, that want to maintain the status quo. Now, the people in the audience, the guy saying shut up and all this stuff, those are the people that are keeping Kirsten Gillibrand in office. But there is someone running against Kirsten Gillibrand, and that's Diane Sare. Diane Sare is not running through the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And if it were me, if I was Diane Sare, I would be calling Kirsten Gillibrand out every chance that I got. If I were Diane Sare, if she would have been available, I would have showed up at that town hall myself and called Kirsten out for what she really is. So the way that you get someone like Kirsten Gillibrand out of that seat is you have to organize and mobilize the non-voters. You have to get the youth who stood up at that town hall. You got to get them to come out and support you. You have to go to the people who gave up on voting because they're like, the system doesn't help us. You got to go get those people. And that's how you get a Kirsten Gillibrand out of that seat. And we've seen it happen before. We've seen people be able to unseat these status quo, corrupt, bougie politicians. And that's exactly what she is. Running on women's rights. Get out of here. Get out of here. I told you that Israel is losing support. I want you to see this video from a veteran that is going to explain to you that they know for a fact that Israel knows that they are killing civilians and not Hamas. Listen to what she says. This is a very revealing video.
We have technology that we can see exactly who's in these locations and buildings. So they're targeting and bombing homes, knowing who and how many children were actually inside.
Everybody heard that? So she's a veteran. We'll say this again. She's trying to tell you from experience that they have the technology so they can actually see who's inside.
We have technology that we can see exactly who's in these locations and buildings. So they're targeting and bombing homes, knowing who and how many children were actually inside. My name is Josephine Gilbo. I'm a 17-year Army veteran. I recently got out of the military last year. Having that background as an intelligence officer and understanding what defense actually is, I can see clearly that this is not self-defense. The civilian casualties is catastrophic. They're targeting homes filled with children. The elite that sit in Capitol Hill sit there and lie over and over and over. I just want to highlight one of the biggest awakenings that I think I've had the last few weeks coming here and lobbying with the senators and the congressmen is just how corrupt our government is. And that anyone that's in the military is simply just one chess piece that they use at their leisure for their own internal gain to protect their own internal assets and money.
There it is, the money part. This woman here, shout out to Stu Peters for sharing this. 17-year Army intelligence officer blows whistle on official Israeli narrative. Protect this woman at all costs. I want to speak on something that she mentioned there about the technology. If we go back to one of the videos that Julian Assange published, there's actually an officer saying there are kids in that van. Some of you have seen that video on social media before Twitter removed it. There is an officer saying on the audio, there are kids in that van. You can see on the video that they are actually able to see who was inside the van. And the U.S. military, they went ahead and they blew up that van anyway. That's one of the reasons why the U.S. is trying to make an example out of Julian Assange. I can't show you the video on here. It's not even on social media anymore because they removed it once it started to go viral. They can see. And if they have the technology to see if there's women and children in those homes, they have the technology to see who's in your house. Everybody pick up on that? They can see what you're doing too, if they wanted to. That's the whole surveillance issue. Think about that for a second. But they're losing support from the military. And I don't think I've ever seen this within my adult life. Shout out to Talia Jane, an autonomous network of active duty service members across nearly all U.S. armed forces have released an open letter condemning Israel's genocide in Gaza. This, you can't make this up, folks. Open letter from concerned U.S. military service members. With the greatest respect, we seek to reaffirm our oath as proud military service members of the U.S. In no way do we seek to make our political or partisan statement discredit any of our federal institutions or claim to represent the Department of Defense in an official capacity in accordance with the Hatch Act of 1939 and the standards of conduct set out by the Uniform Code of Military Justice. We acknowledge that all branches of the U.S. military are values-based organizations that emphasize that all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. We are privileged to serve and do so with the utmost pride and love for our country and Constitution. War crimes are not a partisan or political issue. Genocide is not a partisan or political issue. Crimes against humanity are not partisan or political issue. Human rights are not partisan or political issue. Freedom is not a partisan or political issue. It is undeniably evident that the IDF are repeatedly and systematically committing war crimes in Gaza. Support for the conduct of the IDF is unacceptable and inconsistent with our values in the U.S. Armed Forces. It is incumbent upon us to hold those we call our partners and allies to the same standards that we hold ourselves as experts and professionals. We cannot defend the indefensible. We cannot abide by such a double standard, as there is no legal or moral gray area when service members of any nation target and kill civilians. It puts a bad taste on the military, regardless if it's IDF. It puts like this dark cloud over the military across the world, what the IDF is doing. The laws of war either apply to all of us or none of us. We strongly condemn the genocidal actions of the IDF in Gaza. The terror tactics that are being used by the IDF against civilians in Gaza must stop at once. With our close ties, the wanton misconduct of the IDF makes it difficult to uphold good order and discipline within our own ranks. The secondary and tertiary effects of the IDF's misconduct in Gaza, or tertiary, effects of the IDF's misconduct in Gaza undermine our own morale, readiness, and ultimately our mission to protect the American people and defend our Constitution. Our greatest leaders have impressed upon us that it takes personal courage to stop somebody when they are doing something they should not be doing. The U.S. military is the finest in the world because our unwavering discipline. Our all-volunteer force is a global force for good, with our ranks filled with patriotic Americans who boldly defend our country against enemies, both foreign and domestic, and have done so enthusiastically since 1775. We are uncompromising in our dedication to our duty and to our mission. We hold ourselves accountable and to the highest standards and expect the same for those we call allies and partners. God bless America. Concerned U.S. military service members. Now, I would say that the U.S. military doesn't actually do or represent what's good. There's a lot of things that have been happening. And Julian Assange revealed those things because our service members are also guilty of war crimes. It's not just the IDF. This is across the board. But the fact that you have these confrontations happening week after week, we just talked about the AOC confrontation, this confrontation that happened against Kirsten Gillibrand, those protesters calling out where her money comes from, the donors, the fact that she's connected to AIPAC, and the fact that you now have, shout out to Aaron Bushnell, rest in peace, because now you have the U.S. military, armed forces members speaking out against what the IDF is doing and what the U.S. government is supporting. I haven't seen this in my adult life. And I think that this is very telling. Israel is losing support. Let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you so much for the super chat, Jay. Here's a little something for your birthday, Sabby. Enjoy it to the fullest. By the way, my mother's also a Pisces, March 19th, so I know how y'all operate. Yeah, we're something, aren't we, Jay? Pisces season. We're something. Shout out to Giovanni for the super sticker. Muata says, I'm 68 years old. Not all boomers are ignorant. You're correct. You're right. You're right about that, Muata. Thank you for the super chat, Perry. Why do all the feminists who care about women in Iran care absolutely about nothing about the Palestinian women? Because it suits their narrative. But great, that's a good question. Gemini says, OMG, I actually get to join the chat. Hey, everyone. What's up, Gemini? And Danny says, Aaron Bushnell said the exact same thing. This is a genocide. Right. If they have the technology to see who's inside those homes, they also have that technology to see who's inside your home. Never forget that. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. It's a surveillance state. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Sabs, seniors get their needs met. They are proactive and show up at these town halls. The young are reactive, where they show up after the deed has been done. Reason? Seniors are retired so that they have a lot of time on their hand. Traditionally, those in their 20s are living their lives doing fun stuff, while those 30 plus are busy raising families, tending to marriages, and don't have time to show up until too late. Or they're also busy working. That's another thing. That's the reason why some people just don't have time to attend the town halls and things like that. They're busy working. Shout out to Terry Hinton. It's also Terry's birthday is this Friday as well. We're Pisces peeps in the house. Shout out to Terry. Awesome. If you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. That helps me with the algorithm. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Yeah. We're moving on to our next story here. So yesterday was Super Tuesday. I have some interesting results to show you in reference to how some of these states voted for both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And we're also going to take a look at that uncommitted / no preference vote and how that actually turned out in some of these states. But first and foremost, I want to start with this clip here. We're going to start off with Donald Trump, right? Because the mainstream media, the point that they are making after Super Tuesday is that Donald Trump does not have a solid hold or a strong hold on the Republican base because Nikki Haley was able to still pull some of the voters. Don't get me wrong, Nikki Haley didn't win any state except for Vermont. And the district, she won the district of DC. She won DC a couple days ago. But listen to how they frame this, because what they're trying to tell people is the fact that Nikki was still able to get any votes at all, or the percentage that she got. They're saying that Trump actually does not have a large base in the Republican Party. Tell me what you think about that. Listen to this.
And then overall, and I look at the exit polls, and particularly it was in California, Virginia, North Carolina, around 36% of Republicans, people voting in the Republican primary, saying they're not willing to guarantee that they will support the Republican nominee. You know, that tells me Trump still has a problem consolidating his support. And it's interesting because, you know, let's assume the New York Times poll from the other day was correct. That said that Trump was getting 93% of the vote that he had in 2020, yet still people voting, somewhere between 20 and 40% of people voting in the Republican primary are not voting for him. So who are those people? Maybe they're independents, but they're people that are open to voting for Joe Biden. So I feel I'm coming out of this sort of primary season feeling more optimistic about Biden's room to grow and Trump hitting some kind of ceiling.
Now, to me, that doesn't really make any sense. And I don't even like Donald Trump, but to me, that doesn't really make any sense. You can look at the numbers for yourself, right? If you look on the screen here, because they're premiering results on the bottom here, even in Tennessee, that was 79% in. He got 77.4%. Nikki Haley was at 19.5% at that point in time. There is obviously a significant difference, and the look on her face just cracks me up. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense what you're talking about, boo. I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to convince the American people that Donald Trump actually doesn't have as much of a chance as people think that he does, or as the polls say that he does. But the reality is he does have a chance, and he does have a strong chance, or there is a strong chance that he could win again and Joe Biden could lose. Not just also based on the numbers, but also based on the fact, if you talk to people on the street, the number of people that said they're not going to vote for Joe Biden this time around, or they may be willing to vote for Donald Trump just based on the economy alone. I've heard that from multiple people. I showed you the poll last night, right, where we looked at the numbers of African-American voters, where Donald Trump now has 23% of the African-American population for support. He went from 9% to 23%. So they're trying to put this message out there to make it seem like he's not as big of a threat as people think. But remember, they did that in 2016. They convinced people that there was no way that Donald Trump was going to beat Hillary Clinton, and they were wrong.
Jen, I have to give you the opportunity to say California Senator Alex Padilla, because Kevin De Leon ran for it but didn't get it.
Thank you so much, Senator Alex Padilla.
Yes, I knew you would want to say that, and I wanted to give you a chance before we got too far down the road.
Oh, that's so nice of you.
Claire, let me ask you about, the points that Jen was just making there in terms of the overall strength of the general election candidates in the presidential tonight and what we're learning about that from these primaries.
Hey, listen, I think the thing I take away from today is looking at the margins and deciding which party is really more united. In all the states that voted today, if you look at the results that we know right now, there was only 2 states where Biden won by less than 70 points. OK, everything else, 80%, 82%. You know how many states Donald Trump won by more than 70 points? 1, Alabama.
Pause for a second. Here's what Claire is leaving out. By the way, she was part of the Hillary Clinton team. You should know that when you hear what she's saying, right? Okay. So the majority of Americans don't vote in the primary. The majority of Americans don't vote in the primary. So the fact that she's also ignoring the number of uncommitted votes that did happen, I can tell you the majority of young voters don't show up to vote in the primary either. And it could be young voters that decide who the president will be in 2024. Let's remember how they heavily came out to support Barack Obama. And let's remember how they heavily came out to support Joe Biden in states like Georgia in 2020. So, of course, Joe Biden was going to get over 80-something% when you actively suppress the candidates that were running against him in mainstream media. There was no debate. People who voted in the Democratic primary, a lot of these people didn't even know Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips were running. She conveniently leaves that out. So there was no Democrat primary debate. There was a Republican debate, which Donald Trump wasn't even a part of. But people got to hear Nikki Haley over and over and over again through the debates, and she received a lot of coverage in mainstream media. Same with Dean Phillips. He kind of came out of nowhere and still did well for the fact that he came out of nowhere. I didn't even know who this guy was. So she's leaving that out. it is important that you give people that information. If there would have been debates for the Democrat candidates, I would argue that those people that were running against Joe Biden would have received a higher percentage. The reason why they didn't is because most people didn't even know they were running. And you talk to people, average people in the street, they'll tell you, I didn't even know these other people were running against Joe Biden. I heard it all the time. So Joe Biden's percentage, I would argue, would not be as high as it is if they would have had debates just like the Republican Party had debates. And if it wasn't for the media blackout against the candidates that were running against Joe Biden in the first damn place. Of course, she's going to leave that out.
So there are more people voting against Donald Trump than are even thinking about voting against Joe Biden. And I get the uncommitted is sending a message, and I think it's one that needs to be heard. I think it's important for our party. But really, there is a Republican war going on behind the scenes. It's playing out in primaries all over the country tonight, where big money is going in against MAGA candidates. They have a problem in the Republican Party in terms of how unified they are. I don't think we have near as far to go.
Well, let me just stop this for a second. We're going to go to the next clip. So first of all, Claire, you see the things they talk about? We're much more unified. If we're so unified, what's up with all these uncommitted votes? If we're unified, the Democratic Party isn't unified either. You have a progressive split from the status quo, centrist, typical Democrats in the party. We're not united. If we were united, right, then you wouldn't have all those uncommitted votes. If the Democratic Party was united, over 100,000 people in Michigan wouldn't have voted uncommitted. I think people are going to be surprised in November. They're not talking to people on the ground. These are just a bunch of paid pundits to repeat State Department talking points. And I think people are really going to be surprised. Now we move on to Nikki Haley's support. And Nikki Haley has dropped out of the race. Let's see what happened here with Nikki Haley.
You can see the states that have called now all red for former President Trump, the states that are too early to call. This one's interesting. I'm curious what Chuck's going to say about the state of Vermont. That one may be close. You heard Ali Vitale talking about Nikki Haley's hopes there, and then plenty more to come in the hour ahead. Tom, I'll take it back to you.
Hallie, we appreciate that. Come on down here. Even though we have like 18 steady cams, we're going to share this one because we love sharing everything. Chuck, you got some great data in, and the key to winning a Republican primary is to get the most Republican votes, and you're finding something interesting.
And we don't mean to be snarky about that. But the point is this, right? And I wanted to put together, look, we're not exit polling every state. I wish we had the resources to do it.
Right.
But we're happy if somebody wants to pay us to exit poll most states. But we have every place we've exit polled. Yeah. Here are 4 key primary states that we've exit polled, okay? So you got New Hampshire, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. These percentages you're looking here, this is Nikki Haley's percentage of Republican support.
So I wanted you to see this because this goes by what I've been saying all along. She did not have strong support from the Republican Party. That's why she dropped out. This is why she had to drop out. Nikki Haley was propped up by some Democrats, and she was propped up more so by independents, but she never had the strong base of the Republican Party. Now, the question is, for the people who voted for Nikki Haley in the primary, where are those voters going to go in the general? I would argue, I think some of them are still going to end up voting for Donald Trump, and some of them may stay home. Something to think about there. But that's the other piece that Claire was leaving out. Some of these voters that voted for Nikki Haley in the primary, some of these people come the general election, they're going to go ahead and vote for Donald Trump because some of the people may be party loyalists where they vote for the Republican candidate regardless of who the candidate is in the end. Claire is leaving that out.
In these 4 states.
Registered Republicans.
Actually, either self-described or registered Republicans. And as you can see here, her home state of South Carolina, her high water mark has been 30%. At best, she only got 25% of actual Republicans in New Hampshire. Coming up short in Virginia. Look at this, below double digits, below 20% there. Now, we have her percentage where she gets her strength is among non-Republicans. Right. This is her percentage among people that are unaligned or won't call themselves a Republican. Obviously, again, her home state, she did best among those voters with 62. But these numbers needed to be 75, 80.
And it's not trending higher.
It's not. And here's something else to think.
No, it's not trending higher. And so notice how they're talking about Nikki Haley, right? They're talking about Nikki Haley almost as though they were rooting for Nikki Haley. Now, this is MSNBC. This is the liberal news media, right? But notice how they're talking about her. CNN has been doing the same thing. These people were actually secretly rooting for Nikki Haley. And that goes to show you once again, when it comes between the two parties, they're not really caring about the difference of the Democrat or Republican either. They just want someone in that status quo. That's all they want to happen.
About here. And it's just, look, we're watching tonight and we're talking about Vermont because it's close. Okay. All right. She's leading right now
blue state,
in one state, in Massachusetts. We can go ahead and pull it up. She is leading right now in Massachusetts.
Okay.
This is the only state of all of the ones that we're covering that she's leading in right now. And then there's only one other state. Okay. I want to remind people of the New Hampshire results. Here are the New Hampshire results.
Right.
Okay. Here was Nikki Haley number 43%. That was her New Hampshire number. Okay. Right now in Vermont, she's over 43, sitting at 47. And in Massachusetts, she's sitting at 50.
Yeah.
There is not.
Those numbers did not hold. I just want to go ahead and tell you that part. She did win Vermont, which Vermont is a quirky kind of state. You know, that's Bernie's state. She did win Vermont. But I think some of these voters that voted for Nikki too may end up voting for RFK Jr. if he's on the ballot in their state. But Nikki Haley did obviously drop out. She won Vermont, she won DC, but I think we all saw this coming. So here is Nikki here.
In all likelihood, Donald Trump will be the Republican nominee when our party convention meets in July. I congratulate him and wish him well. I wish anyone well who would be America's president. Our country is too precious to let our differences divide us. I have always been a conservative Republican and always supported the Republican nominee. But on this question, as she did on so many others, Margaret Thatcher provided some good advice when she said, quote, "Never just follow the crowd. Always make up your own mind."
So here she is quoting Margaret Thatcher, of all people. Ay, ay, ay.
It is now up to Donald Trump to earn the votes of those in our party and beyond it who did not support him. And I hope he does that. At its best, politics is about bringing people into your cause, not turning them away. And our conservative cause badly needs more people. This is now his time for choosing. I end my campaign with the same words I began it, from the book of Joshua. I direct them to all Americans, but especially to so many of the women and girls out there who put their faith in our campaign.
I don't think Joshua would be feeling you like that, Nikki. It's always funny to me when people want to bring up scripture or, you know, books from the Bible. And I grew up in the church, so I'm very familiar. But it's always funny to me because I'm like, I don't think Joshua would approve of your politics, hon.
Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for God will be with you wherever you go. In this campaign, I have seen our country's greatness. From the bottom of my heart, thank you, America. God bless you.
And just like that, Nikki is gone. And what's interesting, notice Nikki Haley did not say whether or not she would get behind Donald Trump and support him. She has yet to make a decision on that. So will be really interesting. It makes you wonder what's going to happen there. Now we're going to move over to what happened with the Democratic Party. Now, this happened in 2020, and it happened again this year. Joe Biden once again has lost the American Samoa Democratic Caucus. So I don't know if everyone remembers this, but in 2020, it was actually Michael Bloomberg won the American Samoa. Joe Biden did not. And this happened again. I've never been to the American Samoa, so I don't know what's up. Oh, by the way, Kirsten Sinema also is Dunzo. I don't know if everybody heard about that. What's wrong with the Hill? Their site is always wonky. Go away, Kirsten Cinema. I'm trying to get away from you. Hold on, let me come back out. Go back in. Eric, can I get rid of that? Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't know why they put those videos at the top. Like, I can't just go away. Okay, here we go. President Biden was projected to lose the Democratic caucus in American Samoa to an obscure candidate in a surprising result that comes amid a string of Super Tuesday wins. It goes on to say Democrat Jason Palmer, an entrepreneur running a long shot bid against the incumbent, was projected to win the U.S. territory's Democratic race. Palmer has reportedly qualified for the presidential ballot in just 16 states and territories, according to a release from the campaign through PR Newswire. Palmer notably campaigned in the territory. So this was news to me. I didn't know this guy was running. Did you? So Joe Biden did not win the American Samoa, just as before. And something else happened. I want to show you what happened here in Massachusetts. I want to make sure I'm going to the Democrat. Yeah, we'll show both of them. I want to prove a point. When we talk about that uncommitted vote, well, let me get a little bit bigger. Yeah. Look at what happened here in Massachusetts, my state. So again, you see Trump and Nikki. Trump got 59.7%. Nikki got 36.7%. But what I want you to focus on is no preference. So in Massachusetts, we didn't have uncommitted. We had no preference. Same thing, same cause. However, on the Republican side, 5,615 people voted no preference. Now, that's not a lot considering the number of registered voters in Massachusetts. However, what it goes to show you is that even on the Republican side, there were people voting against, or voting against the genocide. Now I want to show you the Democrat results here. So in Massachusetts, Joe Biden won by like 81.4%. But look what came in second place. No preference. Over 59,163 people in Massachusetts voted no preference, voting against the genocide. That's 9.2%. Now, somebody do some math for me in the chat. I know we got math whiz out there somewhere. Take 59,163 and add that to, where did it go? 5,615, and we should come up with a total over 60,000 something. Then there's more. Over 29,000 people in Massachusetts voted for Dean Phillips. We can view all candidates. Over 20,000 voted for Marianne Williamson, and over 11,492 were write-ins. So don't get me wrong, Massachusetts, for the most part, is a blue state, right? Will still be blue. It just is what it is. But, the fact that you had between Dean and Marianne, that's over 49,000 people that voted for the other candidates and not Joe Biden. Then you have 59,000 that voted no preference. We're coming up on over 100,000. Now, some of these people that voted for Dean and Marianne in the end are Democrat loyalists, and in the end, they'll end up supporting Joe Biden. I already know how this works. Not sure about the write-ins. Those people might stay home. But some of these people that voted no preference might just stay home. So it'll be interesting to see what happened. But I wanted you to see that, ladies and gentlemen, that on the Republican side and the Democrat side, there were voters voting against the genocide by choosing to vote no preference. And I want to show you how the other states panned out in reference to the uncommitted or no preference votes. Check this out, peeps. You guys realize in North Carolina, over 85,000 people voted uncommitted? That's 12.6%. In Minnesota, this is going to be one to watch, by the way. This is going to be a telling one. And I'll give you more information about that in a second. In Minnesota, over 40,450 people voted uncommitted, 19.3% in Minnesota. Colorado, 36,799, 7.4%. Alabama, 10,000, over 10,000, 6%. Iowa, over 480, 4%. Massachusetts, over 35,000. Actually, it's more than that. This might have been when he first saw it, but Massachusetts was actually higher than that. And Tennessee, over 10,000. The point that I'm trying to make here, folks, is this. Come the general election, these people are either going to do one or two things. They're either going to stay home, or I think they're going to vote third party or independent. If people like Jill Stein, RFK Jr., and, well, maybe not RFK Jr. because his Israel views, they probably won't pick him. But if people like Jill Stein or Cornel West can pull away from this group, that could be a game changer, son. That could be a game changer. He said uncommitted / no preference did better than Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson whenever on the ballot. What does that tell you? Shout out to Karim for those numbers there. Now, the question then comes, as I mentioned, what happens to those people come the general election, where they're freaking out about this already? Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip discussing some of the Super Tuesday uncommitted vote and its consequence in the general election. Listen to this.
That's healing that has to be done. Now, are progressives going to vote for Donald Trump? I would say 99.9% of the cases, probably not. But we talked about this a bit earlier. If you stay home or you vote third party, especially in a close battleground state, and I don't know that Minnesota will be one, but Michigan will be, Wisconsin will be, Pennsylvania will be, Georgia will be, Arizona will be, Nevada will be, and potentially, throw in North Carolina, Virginia, or Minnesota in there if that's where we end up come October, November. In a battleground state, you worry. You worry. Colorado used to be a battleground state. It has trended blue. You might say, 85-7, whoop-de-doo. This is the primary. Those are your voters. You need them in November. That's healing. That has.
Check this out, folks. And actually, this wasn't the full total, but at that point in time, it was 18.1% that voted uncommitted in Minnesota. So peep this, folks. He says that's healing that needs to be done. And he uses a scare tactic. What's going to happen to those people if they're not going to vote for Trump? And it was really interesting. He said, these progressives aren't going to vote for Donald Trump. First of all, he's assuming that all those people that voted uncommitted are progressive. They're not. I just showed you conservatives that voted uncommitted. Not everybody who voted uncommitted or no preference in the Democratic Party is a progressive. I think that's a mistake for mainstream media to assume. If they actually were on the ground and they talked to some of the voters, they would know that. And then we bring in Chuck Todd. Now they're like, what's going to happen? What about the third party candidates? Should we be afraid? Case Study QB here is doing the damn thing. Again, I told you they're freaking out because they know.
You have Cornel West on the ballot here and Jill Stein on the ballot in these two states. Then I buy that Gaza could be a real problem. But if they're not on the ballot, then where does that protest go? Then there's the RFK thing. Look, I think.
Pause for a second. You heard what he said? If they're on the ballot, I'd be worried about the protest vote, the Gaza thing. But if they're not on the ballot, notice how he said that? First of all, Chuck needs to do some research. Jill will be on the ballot because she's running through the Green Party. I can't speak for everybody else, but the Green Party, do you guys realize Jill Stein was on the ballot in over 40, I think it was over 45 states when she ran in 2016. And she's picking up state after state after state. I see it every day on social media. You think Jill Stein won't be on the ballot in Minnesota? Are they serious? You think Jill Stein won't be on the ballot in Michigan? Are we serious? She'll be on there. I know the Green Party will be. I don't know about everybody else, but he's hoping that they won't be on the ballot.
Then where does that protest go? Then there's the RFK thing. Look, I think RFK, it's pretty clear to me, the polling shows, it hurts Trump as much as it hurts Biden. So I don't know if RFK is the same. But to me, having those liberal third-party candidates, if they're on the ballot in those two states, that's real trouble for Biden.
And I just see the bigger picture is you see it in poll after poll. When was the last time you had an election where there was this little enthusiasm for both candidates? I know 16 was high. This looks even higher.
You have Cornel West.
So he's talking about these states. He's talking about the Minnesota, right? And he's talking about Michigan. Jill will be on the, I can guarantee, I'm telling you, Jill's probably going to be on the ballot in Michigan. She was on the Michigan ballot in Michigan before. She's actually, Rome from RBN is actually going to be meeting with Jill tonight. She's out there in Dearborn, Michigan right now. Michigan, remember, Jill actually does pretty well in Michigan if we go back to 2016. And that was before the war in Gaza. So imagine how well she might do this time around. Remember, we've already had both Biden and Donald Trump as presidents, so they can't use that fear mongering again. They're trying to, but I don't think it's going to work this time. Then there brings up the issue here of the Senate race. We'll go to the one in California. Of course, Adam Schiff did win the Senate seat against Katie Porter and against Barbara Lee. He also had a lot of big money behind him, of course. But Adam Schiff didn't really have a good time with his acceptance speech here because protesters showed up and showed out against him.
I want to thank you all.
Someone came up and said to Adam Schiff, who was reading off a prompter, who was trying to stick to the prompter to wrap it up. He went and finished it up. These were people who came in, about 5 or 6 to start with, and said, ceasefire now, ceasefire now. Security ushered them out. And then another couple popped up, let Gaza live, let Gaza live. And then some more came in the middle. Security could not get them out, that they were scattered through the room here at the Avalon Theater and the nightclub. Go down there and pull down to the crowd for me, please. And you see that, there's just a lot of arguing, a lot of disagreement. Again, they were chanting, free Gaza now, let Gaza live, ceasefire now, let Gaza live. And the protesters remain here in the center of this floor. So what was supposed to be a victory celebration and a scripted speech that Adam Schiff was reading off prompter, one no doubt he had carefully crafted a long time ago, was cut dramatically short, and he was now taken off the stage.
I wanted you guys to see that because he was actually taken off the stage, and he's like, what was supposed to be a celebration? Why should they get to celebrate when people are dying in Gaza and they are actively funding it and approving the legislation to give Israel more weapons? No celebration. No. Elizabeth Warren was approached when she was at dinner, and some people said, I feel like that's a step too far. She's just trying to have a dinner with her husband. No rest for the wicked. There ain't no rest for the wicked. None. I don't care if you're at dinner. I don't care if you're playing basketball. I don't care if you're trying to swim. I don't care if you're skateboarding. I don't care if you're chilling on the beach. No rest for the wicked. Now, there's another part of this protest as well. I want you to see it from a different angle so you can actually see him on the stage, because there were different angles of this as well. Again, Adam Schiff did not get a chance to finish his speech.
My wife Eve is here tonight. This is my wife Eve. I want to thank you all. Thank you all so much. We are so lucky so lucky to live in a democracy where we all have the right to protest. We are so lucky to live in that kind of democracy, and we want to make sure that we keep this kind of democracy.
Yeah, so he won, but they made it so that he would not be able to finish that speech. So Adam Schiff did end up leaving the stage. And I absolutely love it. He should not be able to celebrate while you're aiding, this genocide against the people. Max Blumenthal actually called out something about Adam Schiff as well. He called him Adam Schiff. Look at this. Raytheon PAC cordially invites you to join Congressman Adam Schiff, California 28th District, for a concert featuring Beyonce. So for some of you who are probably wondering, where does Beyonce stand on this issue? Because people like her and Taylor Swift have been silent about the genocide. I think you got your answer, boo. Beyonce gonna follow the money that goes to her. Concert featuring Beyonce. You see that shit? It was Wednesday, December 18th. It was Wednesday, December 18th, 2013. Verizon Center, and that was in DC. And look at this. Suggested contributions. $2,500 for a ticket, 2 tickets, $4,000. Checks made payable to Adam Schiff for Congress. Reply card enclosed, or to RSVP, contact Mary Palmer, yada, yada, or email. It is just, so he put this over that so people could see who he was funded by, Raytheon. Right. So again, he backs the military industrial complex. And apparently Beyonce just went along with this, too, because she's like, I'm just trying to get paid. Right. And he actually retweeted this on top of this tweet. Christopher said Adam Schiff's entire victory speech tonight was interrupted by protesters chanting ceasefire now. So the point that Max is trying to make is that Adam Schiff is in bed with the military industrial complex. We can go to part 2 of the Tight VNC, Eric, whenever you're ready. So it's very revealing, ladies and gentlemen. You see where the money is coming from. You see, what's happening here. And I just think people need to keep an eye on Minnesota. I told you it wasn't just Michigan. And we'll have to wait for Pennsylvania too, because Pennsylvania is another one that's running an abandoned Biden campaign. Let's go to some of the comments here. What a doozy, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the super sticker, Juliet. Hello, Julie. Thank you for the super sticker, Giovanni. Thank you for the super chat, Onika. Happy born day, Pisces. Sister, mine was February 25th, 49 years young. Have a blessed and safe vacation. Thank you so much. My birthday is going to be, it's Friday, but I'm heading out after this. Sabby is going to be on vacation. Thank you, Roger. Forget it. It's a premiere, not live. Must have been before. I don't know what you're referring to, but I guess I'll find out. And shout out to Morley for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give Maury a big whoop, 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 whoop. I'll take the comment on Rockfin. Thank you for the tip, Roger. Sabrina, that thing debate that Larry is moderating that he invited you to with Lars Mapstead and others is starting at 5. Oh, you're probably saying forget this. Okay. And thank you for the Rumble rant from Unfuck the World. Do people really think their votes get counted? Why? I've seen middle schoolers hack these machines and change results in 10 minutes. The candidate with the best hackers wins. End of story. Thank you for that. Speaking of military industrial complex, if you have not heard, Victoria Nuland has decided to resign during a time when some people say that it is pivotal in reference to the Ukraine war. Oh, she sure knows how to pick the timing, right? Victoria Nuland, third highest ranking U.S. diplomat and critic of Russia's war in Ukraine, is retiring. I think I may have said resign. I meant retiring, excuse me. Nuland, a career Foreign Service officer who served as Assistant Secretary of State for Europe during the Obama administration, but retired after Donald Trump was elected president, returned to government as Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs in the Biden administration. So what this tells me, folks, is two things. One, Victoria Nuland must be thinking that Trump is going to win in November. Because remember, it said that she was actually a part of the Obama administration. I think she also worked during the Clinton. I thought she worked under the Clinton administration too. But the moment when Donald Trump won, she decided to step down. Then she reappeared again under the Biden administration. And now she is choosing to retire. So that tells me that Victoria Nuland may believe that Donald Trump is going to win in November. And two, this war in Ukraine. Right now, things are not looking favorable in reference to Ukraine. There are politicians in Congress debating whether or not to continue sending funds to Ukraine, and some of them are against it. So there's that too. And it's obvious that Ukraine does not stand a chance here in reference to winning this conflict, right? It's gotten to the point where even France is talking about possibly sending their soldiers to help Ukraine. So now she is choosing, let me get out of here before things get crazy in November. Nuland had served at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow in the tumultuous 1990s and was in the city during the attempted coup against former Russian President Boris Yeltsin. She then became U.S. ambassador to NATO before being tapped to serve as the State Department spokeswoman under former Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton during President Barack Obama's first term. I'm going to go ahead and bring up this part here. As the department spokeswoman and later as Assistant Secretary of State for Europe, Nuland drew the ire of many Russian leaders for her outspoken defense of Ukraine, particularly after Russia annexed the Crimea Peninsula in 2014. So you got to remember which side that she is on. She heavily supports this war. She heavily supports the U.S. government funding Ukraine. And she's been after this since 2014. She is a war hawk. Former Secretary of State John Kerry has recalled on numerous times that when Nuland left the spokeswoman job during his tenure to become the top diplomat for Europe, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei congratulated him for getting rid of that woman. Kerry said he replied that he didn't get rid of her. I promoted her. Current Secretary of State Anthony Blinken praised Nuland for her 3.5 decades of public service and thanked her for her role in shaping U.S. policy around the world under 6 presidents and 10 secretaries of state. Think about what that statement says, shaping U.S. policy around the world. In other words, we're talking about imperialism. We're talking about policing these countries. And we're also talking about removing leaders from other countries. That's really what he's saying. And I want to highlight this part here as well. It says the Russian Foreign Ministry immediately seized on the announcement, calling it an admission of failed U.S. policy towards Russia. And I agree, because what this tells you is that she realizes that Ukraine cannot beat Russia. She realizes that this is a failed war for Ukraine. She also realizes that it looks like, or it could be possible, that Donald Trump actually could win again in November. And if that takes place, remember, Donald Trump said he does not support the war in Ukraine. He would try to end it immediately. You have to take that with a grain of salt, but he's more likely to do that than Joe Biden would, right? So that being said, that would not be good for someone like Victoria Nuland. So she's trying to get out of there quickly. Now, Glenn Greenwald, he had some things to say about Victoria Nuland. Always pay attention to exits, like when people choose to retire or when they choose to resign and how it aligns with everything else that's happening at that point in time. Check out what Glenn Greenwald had to say.
One of the most bloodthirsty and psychotic warmongers to occupy high office in Washington resigned today, evidently and hopefully bringing a shameful end to her long and destructive career in Washington. Victoria Nuland, who worked for every American president from Bill Clinton to Joe Biden, with the sole exception that she was out of power only during the Trump presidency, announced today that she was resigning her position as acting Deputy Secretary of State, a position to which she had just been promoted last July when the prior Deputy Secretary of State retired. There's much speculation about why Nuland may have resigned now. Perhaps it was due to her anger that the Biden administration is not doing more to fuel the war in Ukraine against Russia, one of her pet projects for decades, though the Biden administration is impeded only because Congress, under House Speaker Mike Johnson, won't approve another $60 billion for that war. Perhaps it is anger over the fact that the Biden White House is now tepidly criticizing Israel, a country to which she is more devoted than almost anybody in Washington. Or perhaps, and most likely, it was due to the fact that she was just passed over to permanently become the Deputy Secretary of State, the position second in line to ascend to her lifelong ambition of becoming Secretary of State. Whatever the reasons, and despite the horror show that has already replaced her, someone who also worked for Dick Cheney and has been around the State Department for decades, there is still much to celebrate from this news of the end, at least for now, of Victoria Nuland's career in government. She served as Dick Cheney's top advisor for his disastrous invasion and occupation of Iraq. She then served as U.S. ambassador to NATO when the Bush administration, led by Condoleezza Rice and Victoria Nuland, began attempts to expand NATO right up to the Russian border, including Ukraine. And one can draw a direct line between that expansionist mentality in 2007 and 8 and the decade-long war in Ukraine now taking place. She then ran Ukraine for the Obama administrations under Hillary Clinton and John Kerry, where she became one of the most extremist voices in Washington for placing the U.S. on a confrontational, provocative course with Russia. And then when Joe Biden replaced Donald Trump, one of the first things he did was immediately hire her to run Ukraine for his administration. In 2014, a conversation that Nuland had with the then U.S. ambassador to Ukraine was tape recorded and leaked, allegedly by Russia, in which the pair were caught plotting who should be chosen to rule Ukraine, who was best for the United States, in the wake of the U.S.-supported coup in 2014 that succeeded in removing Ukraine's democratically elected president. While Nuland, in one sense, is merely one of the most extremist representations of the bipartisan machine of endless war that has ruled D.C. for decades at the expense of ordinary Americans, she is also a singular menace and ghoul.
Let me pause here for a second. When you look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, one of the people that you have to point fingers to in reference to that is Victoria Nuland. You see, a lot of times it's easy to point fingers at the military, but it's easy to point fingers at the president as well. But sometimes you have to look at the people that are around them. You have to look at like the Anthony Blinkens. You have to look at the Victoria Nulands. These are the people that oftentimes I think the everyday American is not paying attention to. The president is always the face that's out in the front. But we have to start looking at the faces that are behind the president that you don't actually hear from as much. It's people like her that push these wars. Remember what the article said. She started to have a stake in Ukraine in 2014 after Russia annexed Crimea. So this has been going on for a long time. It was only a matter of time before this war was going to kick off.
Nuland's pedigree is itself revealing. She married into the largest and most toxic neocon dynastic family. In the 1990s, she married Robert Kagan, who for decades was the principal partner of Supreme neocon Bill Krystal, having worked with him in the 1990s to create the leading neocon group Americans for a New Century, which spent years before 9/11 urging the U.S. government to invade Iraq and remove its government. According to Politico, which named the couple among the top 50 most powerful people in Washington in 2014, Nuland and Kagan, quote, fell in love talking about democracy and the role of America in the world on one of their first dates, end quote.
So think about what Glenn Greenwald just said there. At one point, her and her husband were named as the most powerful people in Washington, D.C. What does that tell you? That's never a good thing, by the way. If someone says that you are the most powerful, one of the most powerful people in Washington, D.C., that's actually not a compliment. That means that you are corrupt. That means that you are probably in bed with some type of lobby, probably the Israeli lobby, the military industrial complex. That means that you were able to skate by and get to that spot because you went along with what the State Department wants to happen. And you probably killed some people abroad.
That is neocon speak for invading foreign countries and changing their governments. Kagan's father, his brother, and his sister-in-law are all leading neocons in Washington, always sending other people's families to fight in one war after the next after they architect and sell those wars to the American public while never fighting in any of them themselves. Nuland's status as both a singular force for war and destruction, and her status is one of the most vivid symbols of how bipartisan and insulated from elections is this warmongering ideology, makes her particularly worthy of examination, especially upon her glorious resignation, the final end to her bloodthirsty reign. Understanding her trajectory is vital to understanding how Washington really functions.
That's right. Again, how does Washington function? It's not by or because of the president. They usually try to remove those that try to do those types of things. It's usually because of the people like Victoria Nuland and people like Antony Blinken, the Pentagon members. I want to show you this speech from Victoria Nuland. This was just 10 months ago. It says Secretary Victoria Nuland's keynote address on unleashing market potential in Ukraine. Check this out. Most people probably haven't seen this.
Marjorie, for the kind introduction, and thanks especially to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for working with us to organize this critical forum today. I am honored to participate in this meeting along with Commerce Secretary Raimundo, USAID Administrator Power, Undersecretary Fernandez, my colleague at the State Department, and so many others from the interagency. And it's also a pleasure to have Prime Minister Shmyhal and other Ukrainian ministers here in Washington with us, along with our fabulous Ambassador Makarova. I know you're here, I can't see you. And an incredible group of leaders from across civil society, the NGO world, international business, working towards a better future for Ukraine, for the US-Ukraine relationship, and for our world.
Now, let's just pause there. Think about the people that she just mentioned, okay? You and I would never be invited to this talk. She's talking about world leaders, NGOs. Pay attention to who was actually present at these events.
As President Biden said in his State of the Union address in February, Putin's invasion has been a test for the ages. Obviously for Ukraine, but also a test for America and for the world. Putin's cruelty and depravity, his willingness to sacrifice the men, women, and children of Ukraine, and even so many of his own citizens, threatens not only Ukraine, but the very order of our world.
Now remember, because she leaves this out on purpose, remember what we found out from that interview with Vladimir Putin and Tucker Carlson, which is that the US government and NATO actually implemented a coup. So don't forget that. Before this war began.
A little more than a year ago, the question was, would we meet this moment? Would we together defend the most basic principles of sovereignty, freedom, and democracy? Would we protect the international order that was built on the ashes of World War II and rooted in the rule of law and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states?
When she talks about World War II, notice that she's leaving out the fact of who actually fought against the Nazis in World War II. Who fought against them? She's talking about Ukraine. We're talking about the fact that they have soldiers in the Ukrainian army that have Nazi symbols on their uniforms, right? She's going to leave that out, right? So you did this, Victoria. You went there. You brought up World War II. So you started this. So we're going to take it there. So she's conveniently leaving that out, conveniently leaving out the Nazification in Ukraine, the country as a whole, not just those soldiers that are part of the Azov battalion. But she brought up World War II. Didn't the Russians fight against the Nazis in World War II? Okay.
A world order that ushered in the greatest period of economic progress in human history. Billions of people brought out of extreme poverty and hunger, unprecedented advances in global health, longer life expectancies, and an end to the cycle of bloody European land wars. Oh, wait, until now. Or instead, would we allow a revisionist despot like Vladimir Putin to rip out the foundations of the order that we worked so hard to build?
It's interesting. We really, let me not say we, she really has no room to talk about countries taking land, considering the fact that the US government has been doing this for how long? So the way that they try to paint Russia, it's really interesting to me because Russia doesn't have bases all over the world. The United States government does. That's our military that has bases all over the world. It's our government that has been invading these countries. It's our government that has put sanctions on a lot of these countries throughout the world. But let Victoria Nuland tell it. And this is not to say Vladimir Putin is perfect. He's not. He has his flaws, his faults as well. But Victoria Nuland is pretending like Vladimir Putin is way more powerful, has done way more damage to these countries than the United States government has. That's the hilarious part to me. And you have to connect the dots. This is all about money. It's profitable for the military industrial complex to have war. Peace is not profitable. That's what this is really all about.
And if Putin were to succeed, what would that signal to other despots around the world with similar coercive toolkits and territorial ambitions of their own?
You mean like Israel? See, this is how you can call out the hypocrisy, guys. You mean like Israel, like the state of Israel, how they've taken over, right? They kicked the Palestinian people out, pushed them into Gaza, now committing a genocide in Gaza, kicking Palestinian peoples out of the West Bank and building illegal settlements. You mean like Israel? But she won't mention that either because her and her husband are Zionists.
14 months into this conflict, the answer is clear. To quote Prime Minister Shmihal, we are united in defense today, and we will be united in recovery tomorrow. The American people have provided extraordinary levels of military, economic, and humanitarian support to Ukraine. In solidarity with Ukraine, we and our allies have said no to Russia's brutal invasion and helped Ukraine push it back. We've said no to Putin's nuclear blackmail, no to the weaponization of food and energy, and no to the gross human rights abuses and war crimes inflicted daily on the Ukrainian people.
You didn't say no to those things in reference to Israel, though. When we talk about the humanitarian aid, when we talk about the brutality that's happening there, notice how, like I said, once again, this is how where you can catch them, right? Notice how when it comes to Ukraine, when these things were happening to Ukrainians, we got to do everything that we can to help them and save the people. We got to give them humanitarian aid immediately. We got to send billions and billions of dollars to Zelensky immediately. You guys know it's gotten to the point in Ukraine where they're actually asking women to fight because they're running out of the male soldiers. Do you know that? You know, when Ukraine wanted something, let's just jump to the eat. And by the way, Ukraine is not a part of NATO. So what's it really about? The US government can't say, well, it's a NATO country, we got to help them. No, they're not a NATO country. No, they're not. But when you make that same comparison to what's happening to the Palestinian people, what Israel was doing to the Palestinian people, it's the exact opposite response from the US government. I hope more people see this.
The United States has not wavered in our response to Putin's war, and nor have our allies. We are more united than ever. And we, here in Washington, led by President Biden, will continue to ensure the free world supports Ukraine for as long as it takes.
What do you mean by the free world? Like when people make this phrase, they say this phrase, the free world. What do you mean? I never understood that. The free world will not tolerate this. You mean to tell me there's parts of the world that aren't free? You mean to tell me there's parts of the world where people are still in bondage or people are enslaved? They kill me when they use this term, the free world.
Why? because the American people understand the stakes that might cannot be allowed to make right. Not in Ukraine, not anywhere. Thanks to the bipartisan support of Congress, the American people have already provided over $50 billion in military, economic, and humanitarian support. But equally importantly, we've helped galvanize our partners and allies around the world to do the same. Europe alone has contributed another $50 billion across all lines of effort, in addition to welcoming 8 million Ukrainian refugees. And it's important for Americans to remember that in European homes across the continent, Ukrainians are finding refuge.
Pause. That's the part where I wanted to end right there with her speech. You see how they were able to take in Ukrainian refugees? All across the world. She said all across Europe as well. We've taken in Ukrainian refugees. Notice how they didn't really bat an eye in reference to that. Again, not a NATO country. They've asked to be a part of NATO, but they're not a NATO country. Remember when JB and I reported the story that there was even HBCUs that were giving Ukrainian refugees free tuition? Hampton University, Virginia. See how they're able to just take them in like that? Right? But check this out. Not willing to do that in reference to the Congolese people, the Palestinians. It's interesting who they're willing to take in as refugees. Don't forget Bosnia. Remember the Bosnian genocide? We took in Bosnian refugees here in the United States. So that's something I want you to pay attention to, that Victoria Nuland, this entire speech is a walking contradiction in reference to how our government has handled the situation with Israel and Gaza. A walking contradiction. This is why you cannot take them at their word. People continue to say, Noel, who may be still in the chat, has said, oftentimes we live in a plantation nation. It's interesting how they're willing to bend over backwards for European countries. But when it comes to countries in Africa, when it comes to the Palestinian people, when it comes to other countries in the Middle East, unless it's Israel, not willing to bend over backwards for those people, they're willing to put sanctions on those people and make their life worse than it already is. They put sanctions on Afghanistan, Yemen, Haiti, all across the world. Look it up. How many countries the U.S. has put sanctions on? And the reason why they have this resentment for Russia is because economically, Russia seems to be doing okay, even though they put sanctions on Russia. And Russia is a force to be reckoned with. That's a competitor economically for the United States. Same with China. But other than that, they're not really trying to help people across the world that really need that help unless they are European. Pay close attention to that. But Victoria Nuland has retired. Interesting times, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the super chat, Lurez. Happy early birthday, Sabby. Enjoy your time away. Thank you so much. You guys are so sweet. Thank you, Alan. Happy birthday, Sabby. Thank you. Thank you, Jay. Let's have a happy birthday, Sabby, and adios, Victoria Nuland virtual party. What do you think? Oh, you guys are so sweet. Thank you. Thank you, Joseph. Happy birthday, Sabby. You share a B-day with my wife. Hey, us March 8th people in the house. It's Pisces season, I'm telling you. Thank you, QWERTY. Vitaly Klitschko is still mayor of Kyiv since 2014. He was a close associate to Oleh Tyambuk during coup. Open Nazi with, see Kale picture on Google. Boy, I tell you. And thank you, New York Varsity. What it's really about, it's about bloating the military industrial complex at the taxpayers' expense while using the Nazi battalion, Azon battalion, as cannon fodder. That's right. That's what it's really about. But ding dong, the witch is dead. or gone, excuse me. Gone, not dead. I want to get started there. Okay, we're going to go on to our final story. I don't know if everyone saw this, but apparently Krystal and Kyle interviewed Mehdi Hasan, which is interesting. So Mehdi Hasan has gone on to independent media, and I didn't see the entire interview. I only saw this segment that's posted on YouTube, which is Mehdi Hasan spills the tea on leaving MSNBC. Now, there's some things that are said during this interview that I think is very revealing in reference to corporate media that I think you should see. So let's go ahead and dive into that.
I wanted to go back to, you had mentioned how probably the largest victims of cancel culture are Palestinians and people who have spoken out for Palestinian rights. I know you don't see yourself as a victim, but do you see yourself as part of that? I mean, do you think that's why you are no longer with MSNBC?
There it is.
See, you are good at these tough interviews. You better have lots of follow-ups. Look, I left MSNBC on January 7th. I announced I was live. I was quitting. They were very good to let me negotiate a quick exit so I could go off and do my own thing now.
Yeah.
They canceled the shows, I think, end of November it was, where they announced they were canceling the shows. That was obviously disappointing. Who wants their shows to be canceled? Nobody. I mean, you've been through the MSNBC
I've been there, yeah.
Machine. You would have to ask MSNBC why they did what they did. People have speculated. People have come up with their reasoning. I did my coverage the way I wanted to do my coverage. And
let me pause there for a second. So just as a reminder for people who are not aware, remember Krystal actually used to work at MSNBC, and Cenk Uygur from the Young Turks also used to work at MSNBC. So we have a couple of people, we have those two and Mehdi Hasan, people that actually started in mainstream media that decided to do more of an independent thing. Actually, Krystal went from MSNBC to The Hill Rising. The Rising actually is not independent. It is corporate. It was corporate when she was a part of it as well, but then decided to start Breaking Points with Sagar and kind of do their own thing away from that. And one of the things that I have kind of noticed is that there seems to be this nostalgia in some way, shape, or form for people that have been a part of corporate media to still kind of want to dance with corporate media a little bit, meaning that, you know, people like Mehdi Hasan, he announced he's launching his new network, he's doing his own thing. But when you notice the list of who he wanted to bring on, he said Hollywood elites, right? He said like I want to hear from these people. So in a sense, it's like you left corporate media, but you're still doing some of the same things that you did when you were a part of corporate media. This is why I say to people, if you ever want to start your own YouTube channel and do political commentary, I think it's actually better if you have not come from mainstream media, because once you've done that for so long, some of those things can be kind of tough to shake off, because that's what you knew. That's where you started. So I think it's actually better if you were not a part of that and you just started independently and just did this independently.
Even pre-October 7th, a lot of people just woke up to Palestine on October 7th. I was covering it for MSNBC for 3.5 years. I covered in 2021 when Biden became president. You remember there was it 11-day bombing campaign of Gaza by Netanyahu then? I grilled an Israeli embassy spokesman at the time, which went viral for MSNBC, and no one had any issues, and it was a very well-received interview. I covered Shireen Abu Akleh's killing. I did segments on apartheid and the A-word, which my colleague Ali Velshi, who is still at MSNBC,
and he does a good job too.
I think the first person on cable to really talk about the A-word in the context of Israel-Palestine. So I did all of that. And all I can say is I never censored myself. I said what I had to do. I interviewed the people I wanted. One of my last interviews was Mark Regev, the Netanyahu spokesman.
Yep.
And it was after that interview that they decided to demote you. They canceled your show and decided to basically make you a co-host on another show. And then the next week, we knew Mehdi Hasan was leaving MSNBC. Yes, he has talked about Palestine for years, not just after October 7th. But I think the reason why MSNBC probably was okay with it back then was that we didn't have the war in Gaza. Once the war in Gaza started, all of a sudden, that conversation started to change, right? They're like, wait a minute now. You can't be too hard on Israel. And Mehdi Hasan basically caught Mark Regev, one of the advisors to Benjamin Netanyahu. He caught him in a lie on camera. And he was able to prove that he was lying and the IDF also was lying in reference to some of the items that they claimed that they found inside the hospital. And I think for MSNBC, that there was a stretch too far for them. And that's why they tried to push him out.
And why did MSNBC cancel my shows? You'd have to ask MSNBC.
So there was reporting very soon after October 7th about how you and Ali Velshi and Ayman Mohyeldin your roles were being diminished as part of the coverage of, October 7th and then Israel's assault on Gaza. I mean, did you feel pressure being applied to you? You may not have succumbed to that pressure. I think that's clear from your work product. But was there pressure applied to you? I remember watching the ADL dude going on Morning Joe and saying, is it Hamas that's writing these scripts, these terrorist talking points? Did you feel that while you were there?
So when I was there, as I say, all news organizations had multiple discussions about how to cover this. It was a rolling story. It was a shocking story. Obviously, I'm bound by what I can talk about.
Sure.
As a former employee and in terms of sharing. And I'm also...
Pause. So let's say something here for a second. I wouldn't even say that their roles were diminished, as Krystal said. They basically tried to ghost them. Remember, it was an entire week where none of them were on MSNBC. And then people started to complain about it. And then MSNBC was basically saying like, oh, well, they're on vacation. I'm like, really? All of them at the same time, right after October 7th? Huh. Right? So there was pushback from the viewers in reference to that first. But Mehdi Hasan is sitting here saying that he's bound by what he can discuss and what he can't discuss, even though he no longer works at MSNBC. So that right there tells me he must have signed some type of non-disclosure agreement, which still remains in effect if you leave the company or organization. Very interesting.
Just in my nature, I'm not someone who throws former colleagues under the bus. I've had my differences with many people at The Intercept. Some have come out in the open. I've tried to keep most behind closed doors. There were things I didn't agree with at Al Jazeera English. But I hate these people who kind of, and I'm not going to name names, but people who kind of just gratuitously throw people under the bus. Look, conversations were had. Lots of conversations were had about editorial directions, about tone, about coverage. That's to be expected in every place. All I can say, and I can only speak for myself, is that I said what I had to say. I did what I had to do, and I asked the questions I wanted to ask. That's how I left MSNBC, and that's what I will always do. And anyone who knows me knows that's how I operate.
Pause here for a second. So you see what's happening here? Even though he's left corporate media, he still doesn't really want to criticize them. And that tells me the reason why he doesn't want to do that is because in some way, shape, or form, he still wants to maintain access. That's really what that's about. And it may not necessarily be MSNBC, but it could be he was just recently on CNN, right? He was a guest. He was interviewed there. So it's almost as though if you criticize MSNBC, it's not just MSNBC that is going to hold you accountable. You could be blackballed in the entire corporate media space. And what that tells you is that Mehdi Hasan still doesn't want to completely detach himself from mainstream media. He still wants to be able to go back onto those networks. Everybody see this now? Everybody see this for what this really is. Okay.
Krystal, you've talked about some instances you faced when you were at MSNBC about how you gave a monologue basically saying, please, Hillary, don't run. I don't remember what year this was.
2014?
2014, you did that. And then, you thought nothing of it. You did it. And then afterwards, higher ups came to you and were basically like, if you're going to do a monologue on Hillary Clinton again, you have to run about it.
Yeah, it wasn't, you can't do it. It's that the literal president of the network has to approve any future commentary about Hillary Clinton because, basically what I was told is that a call came in from the Hillary camp. They're very upset about this monologue and they were, oh, you're going to be unfair to us and we're not going to give you access.
Pause. Listen to what Krystal was telling you here. This is very revealing. So apparently the commentary that she had about Hillary Clinton, not only did the network execs not like it, but the call came from inside the house. Hillary Clinton's camp did not like it. Why are politicians contacting mainstream media and telling them what they can and cannot discuss? Why are politicians having this type of hold over the network executives? So you see what's happening here? We go back to the Twitter files. Remember, Adam Schiff was one of the ones that contacted Twitter execs and told them to pull certain information that was damning against Joe Biden. As I said before, one of the easiest ways to control people is the media. But who's controlling the narrative that mainstream media has? The politicians, the deep state, investors, shareholders. The people that you see on the screen, the Joy Reids, the Rachel Maddows, these people are just puppets reading a teleprompter.
And so that was one where the edict literally did sort of come down from the top. And, you know, you said, and I believe you because I saw your coverage, that whatever, you know, conversations were had didn't impact you saying and covering the conflict the way that you felt appropriate. For myself, I mean, I can't rule out that thought of that
subconsciously
scrutiny
got to you.
Subconsciously,
Yes, right.
yeah. I mean, you can't. You're a human being,
so
right?
let's take a step back then. Let's take a step into the big picture.
Yeah.
Big picture. I've worked at the BBC, Sky News, and ITV News in the UK behind the scenes as a producer, sometimes very senior producer. I worked at Al Jazeera. I worked at Al Jazeera English. I worked at The Intercept, and I worked at NBC News in front of the camera as an on-screen personality. In all of those places, there were pressures. There were corporate pressures, financial pressures, ideological pressures. Anyone who claims, and we're going to get into kind of Noam Chomsky territory, that that you can just ignore all that stuff. Of course not. Of course that applies. I've never claimed that there's not a trade-off.
Right.
For those of us who are on the left working within mainstream media, the issue is, where is that trade-off? Where is the line? And is it worth it?
Right.
And I remember when I did my book, when I released Win Every Argument last year, I went on a book tour, and I'm going to do a shameless plug. It's out this week in paperback.
I want to talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
When I did the book tour for that last year, we did an event at Politics and Prose, and you can watch it on YouTube with my former colleague Jen Psaki. And somebody in the audience said to me, came up to the mic, we did a Q&A, and he said, "Young kid," and I feel so bad because I was very aggressive in my response. Turns out he was a fan and he was just expressing himself, not in the best way. I got defensive, and when I get defensive, I get aggressive. Bad habit. He said to me, "I've been following you for years, and you called out Saudi Arabia, and you called out Israel, and you called out America, and now you work in corporate media."
You still do those things, yeah.
And can you point to me where I haven't been calling out Saudi Arabia, Israel, or American foreign policy? And he goes, you have, okay, fair enough. And afterwards said that he was actually a fan. He wasn't criticizing me. He just, anyway.
Wanted to raise the point.
He wanted to raise the point. But my point being, there's a balancing act. And I know there are some purists, I'm sure some listeners of this show will say, no one should ever have anything to do with mainstream media.
That would be me. I would be one of the people that say not to have anything to do with mainstream media because I know it's bullshit. I just told you how it's controlled, right? So he says there's a balancing act. I don't want a balancing act. I don't want to walk on a tightrope, right? So he says there's a balancing act. So apparently he was thrown off balance at some point. I, again, point back to that Mark Regev interview, and I think that was the alarm bell there. And so they found a way to get rid of him. They're all for you as long as you parrot the State Department talking points. But the moment you go a little bit, a little off course, they'll get rid of you. Cenk Uygur, the reason why he left MSNBC is because they got frustrated at him because he criticized Barack Obama. He talked about this before. Now, don't get me wrong. I still feel like TYT is corporate. They took that $20 million from Nancy Pelosi's friend, the same guy who wanted to criminalize homelessness in Los Angeles. They took that money from Jeffrey Katzenberg. So I still consider TYT to be corporate as well, but it wasn't always that way. But the thing is, once it gets to the point where you can't say what you feel you need to say, then that is a form of censorship. And I don't feel like people should have to deal with that. That's the problem.
They're beyond. I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that either.
I'm not of the view that we should have no voices in corporate media or mainstream media. And nor am I of the view that everyone who works in those places is a sellout or has had to sell their soul. I would argue that me and a bunch of other people, I'm not going to take their names and embarrass them, have actually managed to do a great job in mainstream media in terms of staying true to their principles, in terms of giving a voice to the voiceless, in terms of being truthful, in terms of giving historical and political context. I mean, for me, I will take this to my grave. You know, the highlight from there's many highlights. One of the big highlights of me working at MSNBC for 3.5 years as a British American, brown, Muslim, lefty immigrant from Al Jazeera and The Intercept. Turns up at NBC Universal. I get an email one day from Noam Chomsky, who says, and I quote, and we all wish Noam the best of health right now. He says, in 25 years, I've never been invited on MSNBC. You're the first person to ever invite me on MSNBC.
Wow.
In fact, I got him.
And it's great that those things happen. I'm not to say it's not great that he didn't, that he invited Noam, Chomsky on MSNBC. I'm not saying but the thing is that they have you there for a reason. They have you there because they know there's a line that you're not willing to cross, right? So even when Matt Taibbi was on the Mehdi Hasan show and he interviewed Matt Taibbi, notice how he really threw Matt Taibbi under the bus. Instead of an interview, it turned into like this attack. I felt like Matt Taibbi was on trial. It was very weird. And then he lied about some of the findings from the Twitter files. And Matt, who didn't have the opportunity to look at his work at that point in time, nodded along, but later on realized that he was actually correct and Mehdi Hasan was incorrect, right? So he did address that in social media. But the thing is like, you are sitting here right now, Mehdi, and you are telling the American people, obviously there's a balancing act and there's trade-offs and there's certain things that have been said that corporate media network execs have pushed back on or removed people for. Again, that is a form of censorship. But at the same time, when Matt Taibbi, who brought us the Twitter files, was trying to expose that was also happening on social media, you wanted to bury him for it. I don't care if it was about Democrats, Republicans. I don't care who it was about. The information that he revealed was important. That the powerful were trying to control these social media spaces. So you can understand how they were trying to censor you and other commentators in mainstream media. But when Matt Taibbi brought forth that information, that it was also happening on social media as well, you tried to knock him out. This is why I wanted you to see this interview. This is exactly why. We're going a little bit more here.
One twice.
Wow.
So for me, I'm like, yeah, I didn't need to do that. I'm not trying to brag. It's not a brag or a humble brag or whatever it is. It's just a factual statement. I didn't need to get Noam Chomsky on, but I got him on. I didn't need to get certain voices on, and I believe that was of value. Well, and I know that's of value because when I left, a lot of people reached out to me and said, you were the person getting these voices on. Yeah. So I do believe there should be people working in those spaces.
So I'm going to ask you, I know you said you're not going to brag. I'm going to ask you to brag now, though.
Right.
Because
I didn't say I don't love brag. I just wasn't bragging at the time. Happy to brag now.
My reading of the situation as an outsider is that I think if you were given a prime time show at the 8 o'clock slot or, whatever, you could have easily been the face of the network. And I think you could have definitely surpassed Chris Hayes' numbers. No offense to Chris Hayes. Matt Al's numbers.
No. So does everybody see what's happening here? Like when Krystal and Saagar started breaking points and they said a new mainstream, they really want to be the mainstream, right? So why is Kyle saying no offense to Chris Hayes? Kyle Kalinske 5 years ago wouldn't have said that. You guys see what's changing here? So there was the interview with Chris Matthews. Why would you bring on Chris Matthews? Now there's the interview with Mehdi Hasan. And I agree, Mehdi Hasan is further to the left than some of the other media pundits. But he says no offense to Chris Hayes because they want access. They still want to have some type of access to corporate media. That's what this is really about. Then what's the point of being independent? I don't care to have access to corporate media. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. But they do. Why? So that they can in turn get access on corporate media? Because after the Bernie campaign, some of these people have been blacklisted. I don't know if everyone realizes. After the Bernie campaign, some of the people that were a part of the Bernie campaigns and some of the commentators that were promoting Bernie Sanders, after that wrapped, some of these people have been blacklisted and they'll never be invited back on corporate media. Because you have to remember, Bree was on corporate media during Bernie's campaign. She was interviewed. Kyle was interviewed, I think, on Fox News at some point. Yeah, I thought it was Fox News. Some of these people have been brought on to. Crystal Ball has been on Bill Maher's show, right? So it's like they don't really want a full break from corporate media. They still want to be able to have some type of access in corporate media, but still say that they're independent. Why?
No offense to Rachel Maddow, but like you're tailor-made for.
Did you hear that part too? These are the people, if you watch Secular Talk back in the day, these are the people that Kyle used to destroy. He used to tear them to shreds. Listen to him now.
Show at the 8 o'clock slot or, whatever. You could have easily been the face of the network. And I think you could have definitely surpassed Chris Hayes' numbers. No offense to Chris Hayes. Maddow's numbers. No offense to Rachel Maddow.
No offense to Russia Gator Rachel Maddow. You would have never heard him say this 5 years ago. Everybody see what's going on? It's very sad. It's very sad. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if people just following money, but it's very sad. I watched this change happen with David Pakman as well. It's just, it's a mess. It's a mess.
But like, you're tailor-made for that position, but you weren't given that position. And so do you view that the same as I view that? That it's almost like there are points deducted because you're so outspoken, because you're on the left.
So again, these are difficult conversations for me to have for obvious reasons, but I would say this, just state the stuff that's on the public record. I did guest host many of those shows that you mentioned. To be fair to MSNBC, they gave me a lot of opportunities. At certain times, I'd be like, what am I doing here? Why am I at 9 o'clock presenting live on MSNBC when a year ago I was just this random dude that a few people read here and there? So they did give me opportunity. I sat in for Rachel Maddow. I sat in for Alex Wagner. I sat in for Chris Hayes. I sat in for Ali Velshi, and multiple other people, Lawrence O'Donnell. I did get those opportunities, and you feel like the kid who's been allowed to drive the parents' nice car. You're like, take it for a spin. Am I going to break it? And I got good numbers and got good guests. And so therefore, it's hard to come up with a simple explanation for what happened. And that's why I don't offer one. I don't want to speculate. And I say each to their own. I can only tell you that, I enjoyed my run there and they canceled their shows, which is their right to do. But on the other hand, they canceled my shows, but they also gave me great opportunities in primetime.
Yeah, well, I'll also...
Which they didn't need to do, right?
That's true. But I'll also say in response to that...
What does that even mean? They canceled my show, but they gave me great opportunities in primetime? Who cares that they gave you opportunities? They canceled your show. I don't understand why people are being so lenient on corporate media these days. I feel like, honestly, I would have never heard this. I'm serious. 5 years ago, I would have never heard this from these individuals. And now it just seems like, I don't know if it's just a money thing or whatever it is, but corporate media is corrupt, and we have to call it out for what it is. And we shouldn't skate around that just so people can get access. And Kyle shouldn't have to sit here and kiss up to Mehdi Hasan so that Mehdi Hasan will come back on the show again. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, bruh, but it sounds like money is involved. That's what it sounds like to me. They listed all the problems with corporate media, but then still they want to tango with corporate media. I'm not trying to tango. I'm not trying to do the cha-cha slide. I'm not trying to do any of those things with corporate media. It's corrupt. That's why you don't see me working at these places. It is corrupt. They have billionaire investors. They have shareholders, BlackRock shareholders of some of these networks. Hello. No. And you don't even need to do all that. You don't even need to do it. This channel, Secular Talk, has over 1 million subscribers. You don't need to do that. I thought that when this show, Krystal and Kyle Friends, first started, I thought it was going to be a little bit more cutting edge in the very beginning. And then I started to see like who they were bringing on. And I'm like, what is this? What's the point of trying to be just like corporate media? I don't get that. All right, guys, I'm going to read these chats. But before so, smash that like button. And if you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. I am going on vacation, guys. I am going to be traveling, so I will not be live again until Tuesday evening. However, there will be clips to keep you entertained. So I'll have clips for the days that I'm not here. Obviously, you guys know I always post clips and stuff like that. So you will have the clips of the news segments, but I will not have a live show until Tuesday evening. I'm going to go celebrate my birthday and I'm going to unplug. And when I say unplug, I mean it. I'm not answering any emails. I'm not responding to any DMs. I'm going to officially unplug and have a good time for my birthday. Shout out to Brock Sampson, gifted 5 Sabby Sabs memberships. Thank you, Brock. Thank you, Trash Panda. Oil for the machine. Happy birthday. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Pamela. Have a happy birthday, Sabby. Enjoy your vacation. Thank you so much. Thank you, New York. Mr. Consistency, huh? Remember, he trashed the Daily Wire, citing that they had no values when 2 years prior, he begged the Wire for a job, citing that he will go against democratic values. Weasel. Thank you, Brock. Although I don't agree with all of your views, we still see eye to eye on some. You and Jimmy Dore are my favorite. Happy early birthday and keep it 100. Thank you so much, Brock. Thank you, Dimby26. Happy birthday, Sabby Sabs. I always enjoy watching your show. Thank you so much. Thank you, none of your business. He sold his soul until his people were being killed. Yep. Thank you, Morrow. Morrow? Yeah. It's nice that Krystal is allowed to bring her son to work with her. Oh, you got jokes, Morrow. You got jokes. And New York Varsity says, Eric read, I put on my super chat Daily Wire, but meant Daily Mail. Oh, the Daily Mail. Okay, thank you. And I'll take the comment on Rockfin. And Eric, you can hop on when you're ready to tell them what's happening Friday. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. HSBCU, we need Dems. Well, you're going to have to accept Ukrainians as students for free. Yeah, that's what happened. So I won't be live Friday, but Eric will be live on his channel. Eric, my producer, you want to tell them what you got coming up?
Yeah, so this Friday in the usual Sabby spot, we're going to keep the spot warm with our Forum 11 here. Let me show a screen on that, and it's going to be Corey and I hosting. And yeah, we're going to talk about MCDS. You can let me scroll that a little. The old money corruption, demands and solutions. And yeah, we're going to have a good time. Oz from Beauty and the Boomer. Oz is going to be on the panel. And favorite chat friend of the show, Mastermind Hour. You'll get to see him in person. Although if you've been watching his show, you've been seeing him there. And yeah, and on my channel, which if you search up on YouTube, Eric T. Red should come right up. And we'll catch you all there on Friday. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific.
Based. All right, guys. And Eric, if you send me that link, I can send your stream out through my newsletter so that people will have that invite whenever you're ready. But other than that, guys, I'm officially on vacay. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and I hope that you have a great weekend as well. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.